Ever hopped in a taxi and, like wondered about the person behind the wheel? It's got to be more than just driving, right?
Right.
So today we're doing a deep dive into the career of a taxi driver
Yeah.
using these really cool insights we got from RoleCatcher.
Yeah, it's a career development platform. And
Exactly.
it's super interesting. I mean, what's fascinating about this field is it's like a tiny little, like a microcosm of city life.
Oh, totally.
It touches on like transportation, tech, customer service, even just knowing the local scene.
Absolutely. And RoleCatcher provides these super in-depth guides that go way beyond just like, oh, here's what a taxi driver does.
Yeah.
They cover like the day-to-day stuff, the career paths, all of it.
Yeah. And that's where they really stand out.
Yeah.
They don't just tell you what a taxi driver does. They really try to help you understand it, like really get it, whether you want to be one or just curious.
I was really surprised by how detailed it gets.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They even break down the career into different stages, which I thought was really cool.
It's about painting the full picture, right?
Exactly.
Not just scratching the surface.
Okay, so let's get this show on the road
Let's go.
and talk about what taxi drivers actually do. Now, you might think it's all about navigating through traffic,
Right.
but RoleCatcher's Guide really highlights the business side of it.
Oh, yeah.
Like managing your fares, giving excellent customer service, even making sure your car is in tip-top shape.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like being a small business owner, but on wheels.
And that's exactly where the flexibility that people talk about, with this job, it's like it could be good and bad.
Yeah, the double-edged sword.
Yeah, because you have freedom and autonomy,
Right.
but you're also responsible for the car, for
Right.
dealing with income that's not always consistent.
Right.
And then there's always the possibility of, difficult passengers.
Oh, for sure.
RoleCatcher doesn't shy away from that at all. They talk about the long hours, the
Yeah.
unpredictable stuff that can happen.
Yeah. And speaking of unpredictable, let's talk about the tech side of it.
Oh, yeah, technology.
Because gone are the days of, just hailing a cab on the street corner.
Staying in the corner, yeah.
Exactly. RoleCatcher has this whole section on technology advances.
Yeah.
Talking about apps, GPS, online booking. It's a whole different world out there now. Remember when you actually had to know the city like the back of your hand?
Oh, absolutely. You had to know every nook and cranny.
Right.
Yeah. Brings up such an important question, though, right? How is all this technology actually changing what it means to be a taxi driver?
Right.
Are we seeing this shift where it's becoming more about, independent contractors who use these platforms to find clients?
Interesting.
It's a huge trend that RoleCatcher really gets into.
And get this, they actually have four distinct career stages for taxi drivers. I had no idea. I just thought you were like a taxi driver.
Yeah.
But there's a structured path from entry level all the way to expert.
Wow.
It's not something you'd usually think about with this kind of job.
No, not at all. And each stage comes with its own set of responsibilities, right? Like
Right.
you start with the basics, driving safely, taking care of customers, knowing the city.
Right. Right.
But as you move up, you might be mentoring new drivers, handling those really tricky situations,
Yeah.
even like helping to set industry standards. It becomes more than just, driving from point A to point B.
And this is where RoleCatcher really shines because they give these really cool examples.
Okay.
They have these example profiles for each stage, and they actually show you what a day in the life is like what an experienced taxi driver actually does.
Oh, that's really helpful.
Yeah, it's like you get to peek into their career journey.
I like that.
It's like instead of just telling you where to go, they're giving you the whole map.
Exactly, yeah.
And speaking of roadmaps, let's talk about actually getting the job right. Okay, yeah. RoleCatcher, they get into interview prep, which I thought was really cool. And they've got this list of questions
Oh, interesting.
that they say are common for taxi drivers. And some of them are kind of tough, honestly.
Really?
Yeah, it's not just about, can you drive a car,
Right, right.
They really want to know, how do you solve problems? Can you handle pressure? What's your customer service like?
It makes sense, though, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a job that requires more than just knowing how to drive.
Oh, totally. One of the questions that really stood out to me was, how do you handle difficult passengers?
Oh, that's a good one.
I mean, we've all been in a cab where, someone's being a little chatty or maybe a little rude,
Right.
but you never really think about how the driver deals with that, every single day.
Yeah, and that's a very common type of question for interviews. It's called a behavioral question.
Oh, okay.
And to answer it well, you have to show both empathy, right? Like you understand where they're coming from,
Right.
but also that you can be assertive and set boundaries.
Oh, that's tricky.
A balancing act,
Mm.
and showing that you understand that is key.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's this other question. It was like, what do you do if there's like a massive traffic jam or a road is closed?
Oh, wow. Yeah, the city throws curveballs at you all the time.
Right. And I was thinking, for a taxi driver, time is money, literally.
Absolutely.
So what do you do?
And I think that question is really getting at, can you think on your feet? Can you adapt?
Yeah.
Can you find a different route quickly and efficiently?
Right.
It's not enough to just know the city. You have to understand how it flows.
Yeah. It makes you realize that a lot of these skills, they're helpful for other jobs too.
Right.
Like staying calm when things get crazy, dealing with people who aren't always the easiest.
Those are really valuable skills no matter what you do.
Exactly. And RoleCatcher actually talks about these transferable skills, which I thought was really interesting because it's almost like it encourages you to look beyond just this one job.
Right. And see how those skills could be useful in different ways.
It's about broader professional development. I love that.
Okay, so we can't talk about taxis without talking about,
The elephant in the room.
the elephant in the room. Ride-sharing apps and RoleCatcher, they totally acknowledge that the whole industry is changing rapidly because of these apps.
Right, right.
So how do traditional taxi drivers, adapt and survive?
Yeah, it's the big question, and they don't pretend it's easy.
Right.
They really stress that you've got to keep learning, keep up with the tech.
So, maybe taking some courses on defensive driving, or even, learning how to use those apps to your advantage.
Exactly, exactly. And they even suggest looking into similar careers, like, maybe becoming a chauffeur or a bus driver.
Oh, interesting.
Or even getting into delivery services. It's about having different options.
Right. It's like the job market is always in motion.
Always changing.
And you got to be ready to move with it.
You have to adapt. That's the key. RoleCatcher also talked about how the actual skills of a taxi driver are changing. Like maybe they'll become specialists in a certain kind of driving.
Right, right.
Or even move into management roles within the industry.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's almost like they're saying, look, the skills you learn driving a taxi, those can open doors to all kinds of stuff.
Right.
It's about taking charge.
Yeah, and what I find really cool is they don't pretend like the future of this industry is set in stone.
Yeah.
They're honest about that, but they also say, hey, drivers have the power to shape that future
Okay, I like that.
by always learning, adapting, and really using their skills to grow.
It's not just about getting from point A to point B anymore, is it?
No, not at all.
It's more about being a problem solver, knowing the tech, almost I don't know, like a local guide almost.
Yeah, that human element. It's so important. It makes you think, could taxi drivers use their knowledge of the city, their people skills,
Yeah.
to offer something that those apps just can't?
Now that's a really interesting thought.
Right.
Yeah.
Imagine taxi drivers becoming local concierges, giving little tours or insider tips to their passengers.
Yeah, talk about a personalized service.
That's going above and beyond.
It's not just transportation anymore. It's an experience.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening, seriously. If you thought being a taxi driver was, I don't know, just a simple job with no future,
Yeah.
think again.
Right.
RoleCatcher shows us how much depth there is, how much potential.
Absolutely. And remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We really encourage everyone to check out RoleCatcher themselves. They've got tons of resources. You can dig deeper into this field or any other one that grabs your attention.
Totally. This deep dive has given us a lot to think about. So until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and remember, every career path has possibilities. You just got to find them.
Yep.